Okay, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming. Nice small crowd here, so feel free to interrupt at any time. My name is Steve Kranak, and
my name's Andy Sagona.
so I'm with the Excel team, and I'm going to talk to you about spreadsheet management and compliance features that we have in Office now. Many of you may not be aware. And then Andy's going to chime in.
Yep, so I'm with the Treasury Accounting team within Microsoft Corporate Accounting. Steve said he was looking for a real-life example of how we're using this today, and I am that guy. So a little bit later in the session, I'll tell you how we're using this and how it's helping us solve really hard problems.
Yeah. So this will be a little bit of a kind of a sidetrack from Power BI and dashboarding and all that sort of stuff, but spreadsheet management has become a very important aspect. I'm going to go into some data about the use of spreadsheets for financial reporting and the number of errors that are occurring in spreadsheets and things like that. But so here's just some of the objectives we're going to try to cover here. Just why. So why are we talking about spreadsheet management? And then what can Office do to help? So we have a number of features that are pretty good. And then I'm going to show you tips and tricks of how to use these new features that we have in Office. And then Andy's going to talk again about how Microsoft is using these tools ourselves. So we're not just saying these are good tools, they're actually getting some real benefits out of it. Okay. So I would need to set the foundation a little bit here for this talk. So there's this notion of something called EUCs. How many of you are familiar with EUCs? Basically, we mean spreadsheets. But EUCs are really things that are created by IWs, information workers, without IT involvement. So typically, we find lots and lots of Excel spreadsheets being used that may be very complex. They may not have any requirements documented. There's no kind of formal development cycle, no testing. That's what you get when you don't have IT involvement. But in addition to
That's a good edge. You get speed.
yeah, you get so you get the trade-off there. You know what the requirements are. You don't have to tell somebody, right? But then they're not documented. So we're also talking about things like Access databases. I mean, PowerPoint, Word. It doesn't matter. These all count as EUCs, but we're going to focus on the spreadsheet aspect of it here. So we just talked about this a little bit, but obviously EUCs help out with people making decisions, and they're quick, because people can do whatever they need to do and get things done. Then it leads to certain problems like you have multiple copies of things around your network. You have people emailing these things. There's a whole host of different problems that can occur, not to mention errors, right? So we have some tools now in Office as of Office 2013 to help mitigate some of the risk involved with this whole use of EUCs, and we're going to talk about that in greater detail. So here's some of the data that I was talking about. So this is research done by a few folks who I put a lot of faith in. The first set there, so 95% of US firms are using spreadsheets in their financial reporting. I don't think that's a real surprise to anyone, but it's a pretty high number. 90% of all analysts perform calculations. Well, yeah, that's what spreadsheets are for, right? And then the last one is really a deficiency, right? So in this research, and I've talked to Feline who did this research, she said she was very generous on what she considered documentation or a manual for these spreadsheets. If they had even like 1 page of notes about a spreadsheet, she counted that, and she came up with 33% have documentation, which is pretty poor. And you may have heard of Ray Pankow, a researcher on spreadsheet errors for years, and this one line says it all. He's actually researched the research about errors, so he kind of looked at all the different research on errors and brought it together, and this is what he found without going into the nitty-gritty details. You can find that stuff online, but there's just errors in abundance, right? And if you want stories about some of this, you can go to usprig.org. Usprig is the European Spreadsheet Risk Interest Group. They have a list of stories from the news. That some are pretty scary, some are pretty interesting, some are funny. But that's a great place to go to learn more about all this stuff.
What does it mean again?
Oh, the European Spreadsheet Risk Interest Group. USPRIG, yeah. Pretty much they go by USPRIG. But, this says it all, right? So to work around the problem, you can take humans out of it, and then you reduce a lot of the errors. That's actually my desk there. Okay, so let's talk a little more about, okay, what does this really mean? So a lot of times you can look at a spreadsheet and on the surface it looks really nice. So this one actually is a pretty nice looking spreadsheet, but if you dig deeper, which we need to do, you may find some issues like there could be broken links. If you link out to other workbooks, you could have hidden data, either hidden rows and columns, which may be okay, but maybe not. You could have invisible cells, so if somebody just put white cells on white background. You can have very hidden sheets. The prize for anyone who knows what a very hidden sheet is. Anyone?
A very hidden sheet, the sheets can have multiple properties, but you need to go into the Visual Basic Studio to change the very hidden property, and that sheet can't be hidden or unhidden by right-clicking on the tabs down below.
Exactly right. Great answer. I have to say, I haven't given out many prizes for that question. We have some more to give out. I don't have a lot of great questions, but we'll see what we can do. So here's an example I got. This is from a real customer. So how many of you link spreadsheets together?
Yeah.
Right? So, and we have a tool. I'm going to show you how this works. This is an extreme example, but the little, let's see if I can point this thing. The little dot that you see on the left side of each of these diagrams represents one spreadsheet or one workbook, and all the green lines represent connections to other files. So it's dependent on all those other files. So, I mean, this is crazy. I think where I was with this customer, we set this running and went to lunch and came back because the tool has to go and scan through all these documents and find all the links.
Wow. And there's a tool for that.
There's a tool for that, yeah, and we're going to show that. It's in Excel, yeah. Believe it or not. Yeah. So I'm going to go over this pretty quickly, but basically you want to ask the right questions about your spreadsheets. Some of those are here, and then you need some tools to help you out make it fast. A lot of this, you can answer questions manually, but it can take a lot of time, right? If you want to see how did somebody change one spreadsheet from last month to this month, you know, looking at it cell by cell obviously is a very difficult process. So combining the right questions, the right tools, you really want to get to where you have one version of the truth in your spreadsheets so you can reduce a lot of risk. The big auditing firms have spoken about spreadsheet risk and spreadsheet management, and these are some of the major kind of categories of control that they're interested in or say that companies should have in place. I mean, some of these just make good common sense. Access control, very important. Change control, knowing who changed what in the spreadsheets, very important. Version control, and I said before, documentation, and you can look at the rest of these. But so here we hope with the tools that we have now in Office and with some best practices that you may implement at your organization, hopefully you can get from a point where EUCs are in an uncontrolled state to one, so you're going from the red to the green and really getting in a better state where you have less risk. Okay, so now to talk about the actual products that we have and features in Office. So we have spreadsheet management features in the cloud, we have server products, and we have desktop products. I'm going to demonstrate mostly the desktop thing, so I'm going to just tell you a little bit about the other ones now. So in the cloud, if you have SharePoint Online and you're using it and you have spreadsheets in there, the search is actually smart about spreadsheets. So the SharePoint indexer will go through and it understands how many formulas you have in your spreadsheets. It understands if you have links in your spreadsheets. It knows how many unique formulas are in your spreadsheet. So if you have a formula and you drag it down to all million cells in the column, that's really one formula. And Excel will count that as one unique formula, and it's a good indication of the complexity. So if you have 10 million formulas but only 2 unique formulas, it's a pretty simple spreadsheet. So you can actually search for spreadsheets based on that information through SharePoint search, and I'm going to hope to show an example of that. So the next one for the server, these are on-premises server tools that we had released in Office 2013. These really go together. One is called Discovery and Risk Assessment, and it's a tool that will scan network shares and SharePoint libraries for spreadsheets, and it pulls back a whole bunch of metadata out of the spreadsheets to help you understand the complexity levels, and you can find where you have duplicates and a whole bunch of things. All that data gets collected and stored in a database, and you can find out a lot of really good information about the spreadsheet inventory that you have at your organization.
Are we going to see a demo of that at all?
I don't have that planned, but I can hook you up with an online demo of it.
Okay, thank
Yeah. The next thing is called Audit and Control Management Server, and this is like Big Brother for spreadsheets. It's just a monitoring tool, and you say, watch this folder, and it will track changes in all those spreadsheets. So every time somebody saves a file or creates a new version, if it's a SharePoint, the server will compare the two versions and then track all the differences in a database and tell you exactly who changed what. And then we have these desktop tools. I'm going to just skip over the description because we're going to actually show these. And I'm ready to show these right now, actually. So can we switch to the demo machine here? Okay, so first off, there was some surprise that these tools may actually be available in Office, so I want to show you and talk about how you can get these. So there's an add-in to Excel that was released in Excel 2013, and it's part of the, if you have Pro Plus, it just comes with it. That's really the main way that people can get it. You can get it if you wanted to just buy Excel by itself. So I don't know if you can get it for Excel 2013 anymore, but 2016, if you buy just Excel, I think you get these tools also. But most of our enterprise customers have Pro Plus, so the Inquire add-in, it actually adds a ribbon to your toolbar, but unfortunately, we weren't able to have it turned on by default because a lot of reasons, but it's very easy to turn this on. So if you have Excel 2013 or 2016, you can go into your file menu, go to Options, go to Add-ins, and then you have to go down to this little drop down and choose COM Add-ins and hit Go. And then it'll bring up this little dialog that has the add-ins. You may have other ones that you have that are not Microsoft, but you can turn on Power Pivot, Power View, Power Map, and Inquire. All you have to do is just check the box and hit OK, and then you should have this new tab in there in Excel. Okay? Has anyone seen that? Is anyone aware of that?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Saw it, didn't know what it did.
Okay. So there are also a couple of tools I'm going to show you that are just on the Start menu. So this tool called Spreadsheet Compare that I'm about to show you is actually a separate application that it's just, you can go to your Start menu and hit Compare and it'll come up. But you can also just launch it directly from this Inquire tab, and that's how I'm going to do it. So Spreadsheet Compare is a really nice tool. There's lots of reasons why you would want to check differences between documents. So Word has had the ability to compare Word documents for a long time, and Excel kind of has been missing that, right? So this is a really nice tool where you can basically just do your work, save your file, and if you want to compare last month's to this month's, or compare one that you sent to somebody with what they sent back to you, there's really any two versions of a document you can compare. And to show you the power of it, I'm going to go through this file I have here and just make a variety of different changes to show you that it tracks or it keeps, it determines differences of different types. Okay, so data entry is one. So I have this button here that makes my data entry go really fast, so I don't have to sit here and type a lot. So I don't know if you noticed, but there should have been a whole bunch of values changed in columns B and C. And another type of change I'll make here is just deleting a row. And then I'm going to go down and change a formula. Just simple, I have a hard-coded number in there. Here I'm going to take a formula and just do a copy and then paste value. So basically deleting a formula with replacing it with the value. And I'm also going to go into my VBA. And hopefully I have the right file here. Nope. This one.
So that VBA project's attached to that spreadsheet, not that overall one?
So yeah, this VBA project, I'm just going in here. I have a macro that actually does that data entry for me. And I can go in there. I'm just going to change one character in one line and come out of there. So I've made data entry changes. I've inserted a row. I've changed a formula. I deleted a formula. I changed VBA code. And now I'm going to go ahead and save it. And I'm going to open up, I have a copy of this file that I just named as like last month's file. So I open that up. And now to compare these, I just hit compare files, again on the Inquire tab there. And this will let you pick any two files that you have open. So typically you would compare, in this dialog, you'd put the older file first and the newer file second. And I'll explain why that makes a difference in a second. But if you happen to choose them in the wrong order, you can just hit this little swap files button and it switches the order. Okay. So I just hit compare files. And like I said, it's a separate application that runs to do this, so it's going to open up in this separate window. But it's usually pretty fast. I know, the bigger file, more complex files you have, it's going to take a little bit longer, but what you have here is two panes. The top two panes are the old and new copies of this file. And then in the middle, you have a list of everything that we found that's different. Yes?
Any Excel version that has Inquire as enables the admin will have the capability to open this?
Yes. So in 2013 and 2016, this is there. There's really no noticeable difference between the two versions. There are a couple differences that we made to support files stored in the cloud a little bit better in 2016. But essentially, the features I'm showing here are all the same. So what can we see here? So the first thing it tells us is that I deleted row 19. Remember, I deleted that one row. So what's really interesting about that, I'll get to in a second here. But remember, this tool is just comparing the files. It didn't actually record what I did, right? So I could have had these files on a different computer, totally unrelated to this, brought them over here, and we can still determine this information. So it categorizes the different types of changes. You can see these little colored categories on the side here. Entered values is just cells with values. Calculated values are cells with formulas where the value changed. So that's probably not super interesting to everybody, but the tool gives you the ability to show or hide these categories. So from working with a lot of customers, they often aren't, they have so many data changes in their spreadsheets. That's not really the concern, right? So they say, I can turn off the data changes. And calculated values especially are really not that interesting, so they can turn those off. In this case, for some reason, I only have one in this file. Maybe I had it on manual calculation mode or something.
So manual calculation mode makes a difference in the comparison?
Well, no, but if I had it in manual mode and I did that data entry, it wouldn't have updated the calculated values. So I think it updated the one cell I changed for anyway. So now I zero in on what's really important. So the function or the formulas in the spreadsheet that are doing my calculations, okay, these are the ones that changed. Just the one that I manually changed, and then this one that says I deleted. So as a reviewer, that's really powerful. Now I can say, I've checked this document. These 4 or 5 changes are okay with me, and I can move on. You'll notice when I click on one of these, it highlights the cell where the change occurred, so I can, it's hard to tell probably on the screen, but it is actually selecting the cell up on the screen there. And then the code change. So it shows me that there was a change, and you can just double click on it, and it drills right into your VBA code. And the line in red is the old version, and the line in yellow is the new version. So you can pretty quickly pick out anything that changed, and everything that's in white is just unchanged. So it's a really great way of knowing, how things are changing in your files there. And I'm going to have it. Oh yeah, question.
Does that work well with versioning on SharePoint with .1 versus .2?
Yeah. So what's really nice if you have these files are just local because of the demo environment I have, but if you have a file open and you want to get the previous version from SharePoint in 2013, you can just go to your file menu and go to the list of versions and open it up. And once you have it in Excel, Excel, like you said, it puts the version number at the end, and you can just pick the versions and compare, and it works, just like this. So Andy can talk a little bit more about how they use this tool. Question first.
Can you undo the changes from here, or can you fix the changes from here?
Okay, the question is, can we undo or fix the changes from here? The answer is no. This tool is just telling you what's different about the files. It's not, again, it's not recording what you changed. However,
You have this tool open and look at the file at the same time and say, here's the thing that changed, make the correction, like we're doing that.
right, yep. So,
Does it make sense to go to the next slide?
or should we?
Yeah, let me just go to the next slide.
Can we switch back to the presentation?
We actually have another couple questions, or you have a question?
Yeah, could you change in those windows up there? Make changes? to the
No.
right?
No. So that's something that I personally would love if this was just right in Excel, but right now it's a separate application. And the reason why it's separate is that this is an acquired product that was brought in just before the release of Office 2013. So it was just, that's how it was. And we just didn't have a chance to integrate it.
It's way cool. Shooting for the moon here, but yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
It doesn't lock up Excel, because I know when you do an Inquire workbook analysis, it kind of locks up your ability to manipulate anything inside your spreadsheet
Right.
while you're doing that workbook analysis. But this will not lock up Excel, correct?
That's right. So the question I'm repeating for the recording is, does the spreadsheet comparison lock up Excel? And the answer is no. It's running it's a separate application completely, and it's comparing the files from disk. So it has nothing to do with what's actually happening in Excel at the time. And if you go back and change things in Excel and you want to see those reflected in Spreadsheet Compare, you need to save it and then do the comparison again.
All right, so before I dive into how we're using the tool, I thought it might be helpful to just give you some context for the environment that we're dealing with. In the treasury accounting world, we have 10 plus different service providers, multiple accounting systems. So we're taking data from all sorts of different sources, different formats, and we're trying to get it into SAP so that we can close the books. We use macros to help standardize formatting. In some cases, we'll copy data from one system, and then we'll pile on formulas to help with classification or leveling or whatever it is in order to get that, and even calculating. If we need to post journal entries, it will calculate, all those formulas will calculate what the journal entry amount will be. So we have mountains of data. One formula change to one cell, and just as an example, one of our most complicated files has over 80,000 rows of itemized investment detail. It's like 65 columns wide, and the last 25 columns are all formulas. So it's like there's lots of logic built into the formula to determine if it's this type of investment, put it in this type of classification, or if it's this type of investment, put it as this sort of leveling, which all feeds into our financial statements. So one change to one of those formulas can have a significant impact on our financial statements. On top of all that, Microsoft has a policy that says if you rely on Excel as the system of record for a significant journal entry, you should consider having spreadsheet controls. Or if you rely on Excel as the system of record for a statement or disclosure, you should consider having spreadsheet controls. And what they mean by spreadsheet controls is having a process to be comfortable that you don't have inappropriate or inadvertent changes to formulas, to macros, to values, And the way we were doing that before we had a tool was manual, and it was horrible. So I'm going to kind of give you the process of how we tried to comply with this and mitigate the risk manually. So before SC is before Spreadsheet Compare, and then after is once we had a tool to help us. So before, we had about 14 spreadsheets that we defined as being financial statement impacting. And because I didn't have good answers to those auditor questions of how do you get comfortable that you have a complete population of changes, we're having to supplement additional controls and overhead into the process. So we had to implement access controls over who could get to the spreadsheet. If there were changes to the spreadsheet, we had to have people manually logging them in a log. So if you're adding a tab, deleting a tab, inserting a column, changing a formula, you'd have to go into a log, note what your change was. We had another person come in and independently validate that the change operated as intended. And then on a quarterly basis, we would be going through each of those 14 spreadsheets, period over period, looking at formulas, looking at values, looking at macros, and it was an absolute nightmare. And by the time you get to the 14th spreadsheet, your brain is a pile of mush, and the quality of that review deteriorates over time. So you don't get, as management, you just don't get very much confidence or assurance because you're really only reviewing on a sample basis. And then you go into an audit. And you get those questions of, how do you get comfortable with completeness? It's very squishy. Or how do you document your review? What cells did you look at? What conclusions did you reach? And so our process is we have to finish this before earnings release so we can be comfortable that our disclosures are correct. And when you're in a very tight window, you can spend a lot of time creating a beautiful audit document, or you can spend a lot of time making sure your numbers are right. So we opted for, can you blame me? We opted for, let's make sure we're comfortable with our disclosure. So about 2 years ago, we became aware of Spreadsheet Compare. And this solved a really hard problem for us because it finally gave me a really good answer for that auditor question of how are you comfortable that you have a complete population of changes. And because I can rely on the tool, which Steve just showed, of here's all the changes, we were able to get rid of that stupid change log. We were able to eliminate the user access control. So we still have the control, but in terms of what we give to the auditors to prove that our numbers are right, that's not one of the things that they have to look at anymore. And it actually cut the amount of time that we spend reviewing spreadsheets in half. And I'm getting 100% assurance across everything, so I'm not looking at samples anymore. Yes?
Did Inquire show who made the change to the spreadsheet?
It doesn't. It doesn't. At least the compare tool doesn't. What we're looking at, it only shows before and after.
Yeah.
But I think you have.
Yeah, so the server tool will actually record who made the changes. And so I always recommend people should save all these files in SharePoint because then you have version history and you know who made that version, right? So.
Yeah, our files are not on SharePoint.
Do you guys use Excel functionality to control which tabs or which cells people can actually touch and make edits to, or is it kind of anybody who has access can make a change anywhere?
We password protect some files, but I would say in general, we have a macro that you can unlock, so anybody on the team with access could make a change. But we're comfortable with that because we have a way of detecting them if they were changed.
Do you share workbooks?
Yeah.
Sorry, so when you say, the question was do you share workbooks, are you talking about turning on the sharing feature in the workbook itself? Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So when it comes audit time, I feel, and actually before I go into that, I kind of alluded to as management, you feel much more comfortable with the process because I've got 100% review of all the changes, and we go and look at every single thing in that output file. And what Steve had showed, the tool spit out all the changes. You can export it to Excel, and that's what we do, and then we'll comment on every single change. And this actually gives us comfort that it's working, because a couple of quarters ago, I had a peer who deleted a formula, added a comment, intending for my manager to see that comment during her review, and there was an open item that she had to update the formula. Well, she didn't see the comment, so our disclosure was wrong, and then we did the spreadsheet compare, and it flagged that a formula was deleted. So I went to my peer, I said, this formula was deleted, there's a comment on it, looks open, what was the resolution? She said, well, I expected the manager to review and resolve that. So I went to the manager, I said, this formula was deleted, there's a comment, it appears to be open, what was the resolution? Total miss, we airballed. So they together figured out what the resolution was, they updated the formula, it actually changed the disclosure, and we had to go into our 10Q and update that number. So this is working. It's giving us as management, much more confidence. And then it comes audit time, and I feel much more confident going into an audit, because I have a good answer to how are you identifying a complete population of changes, because the tool does it. What cells did you look at? Well, that's in the output file, and you'll see it on the next page what ours looks like. What conclusions did you reach? We have really good answers for all of these things. So this is what we produce times 18. So this is just one compare of two files that we use quarter over quarter, and what you're looking at is exactly the same thing that Steve just showed you, but the dump to Excel. One thing I'll call out, there's two tabs. The setup tab shows you file 1, file 2, who did the compare and when, and that's really good from a segregation of duties perspective, so the auditors know that the person who prepares a file isn't reviewing their own work. So that's really good. And then on here, from a differences perspective, so column A is the tab that the change was noted on. B is the cell or the range of cells that were changed. You have old formula, new formula, description, and then column F is what we add. So we actually went through, since we've been using this for 2 years, our review process has gotten significantly better. We used to review everything. And one thing we've learned is not everything in a particular workbook has an impact on our financial statements. So we've done some additional scoping to say, these are the tabs that have financial statement implications, or these are the cells that have financial statement implications. If there are management reporting or recons or operational checks, we don't care if those change and we don't look at them. So when you see out of scope, that's what that means.
And this is using the add-in.
Spreadsheet compare.
Yeah,
This
so
is-
I didn't demonstrate that, but once you have the list of results in there, you can right-click and do export to Excel, and it creates this. It doesn't create the comments column, I don't think, but it,
We add that.
yeah.
That would be powerful.
Take some brain power. And then this is just to make this full circle. This is how we document our review. So on the left is our population of spreadsheets. This is what we review every single quarter. That orange column, that's a link to the file you just saw. So that's the review file, and then we have a sign-off by reviewer and date. So when the auditors want to come test our spreadsheet control, I just send them a link to this, and I never hear from them again. So it's awesome. Much more efficient both for me and for them.
Excellent.
So in your same process has been adopted by every internal subset of the finance accounting teams?
I think we're like the best practice, and there might be a couple of other groups that use it, but we, by far, I think, are the most significant user, just based on sheer volume of spreadsheets and our risk.
Do you tie those 14 spreadsheets or 18 spreadsheets, whatever it's up to, does that tie directly into your general ledger, or is there another way you're getting it?
So we use, basically after we get all of our data into SAP, we've got a manual process to compile our footnotes. And that uses many data sources. So we've got like 10 different systems where data's coming from. So it does tie to our general ledger, but the general ledger isn't necessarily the source just because it doesn't have a granular enough level of detail for what we need to disclose.
Okay, so we have some more demo. Do you want to switch back to the demo machine? So we're kind of taking up more time than I expected, but we have a bunch of other things to get through, so forgive me if I go kind of fast. The comparison tool is probably one of the best features of Spreadsheet Inquirer, but there's also analytical tools that run inside Excel to help you understand more about the spreadsheet that you have open. So again, on the Inquirer tab, the first one I'm going to show here is called the workbook analysis. And this is really a diagnostic tool. So it has, I think, right around 50 categories that it analyzes your spreadsheet with. And you can see the categories over here on the left side. So I encourage you to use this. And if you're not sure what one of these categories means, you just hover your mouse over it, and it brings the definition of what you're looking at. So I'll highlight just a few of these that are kind of interesting. So one is formulas with errors. So this now gives me a list of all the formulas in this workbook that are currently returning an error value. So I see those over here on the right. I can see where they are. I see what the formula is and what the current value is. And you can double click on that and it just goes right to that cell. Right? So that's pretty nice. And then when you come back, the analysis happens once when you first run it. And then when you close the window, if you come back in, it doesn't have to reanalyze it. So if you have a big workbook that takes, a few minutes to analyze, you don't have to worry about closing out and coming back in. It just stores that data from the analysis for the next time.
You said double clicking on that will bring you right to the cell?
Yeah, so I double clicked and this one's actually a bit hidden, but you can see the formula up there. And now if I go back in, all that information is actually still here.
But you can't click away from it to go to your workbook?
No, you can't. The window itself is a modal dialog, so it's kind of, so formulas with errors, let's just look at a few of the other ones. Linked workbooks, this is an interesting one because I know you can go to the Edit Links dialog in Excel and it should show you all the links, but there are a couple types of links that don't show up in there. And actually, if we have a chance, we'll show you an example from one of Andy's real files where they had a link in there that's been there for a long time and nobody has any idea where this thing is in the workbook. And they discovered it, I think, through this, but once you know it's there, then you can be more of a detective and actually find this thing. So this can show you some links that you may not be aware of. Let's see. Formulas referencing blank cells. So that's an interesting one. So why would you have formulas referring to blank cells? Maybe it's a mistake. It's probably a good idea to take a look at those and make sure your formulas are correct. Maybe they're missing a reference because somebody moved something around or something like that. You can find inconsistent formulas. So when you have a range of formulas that you kind of copied down or copied across, if you change one of them, Excel will put the little green tick mark in the corner, and this tool will make a list of all those for you, so you don't have to go searching around your whole workbook. You just get a list of them. Hidden rows, so this will tell you very quickly if you have, hidden sheets also. Hidden sheets, very hidden sheets, hidden rows and columns down here somewhere. Right, so it's really quick and easy if you want to make sure that you have no hidden data or just make sure that what's hidden is what you expect to be hidden. That's a real easy way to check it. And also one last one I'll talk about is cells with comments. So this is one where I know I see lots of workbooks that people document by putting comments all over the place. And this is a nice way you can consolidate all those into one list. And if you want to start documenting a workbook, this is a great place to start. And again, like with the comparison results, you can export this and it creates a workbook with all this information in it. And I think in there, we actually do have a column for comments already pre-built in there for you. So you can use that as part of your review process if you want to.
Just a quick question. So when it comes to changes, like within specific name ranges, are you able to isolate that to do a flat report based on name ranges?
So the question is if you have changes in name ranges?
Yeah.
Yeah, so not in what I just showed you, but the comparison will show you that.
Okay.
So it's equivalent to a formula change, but instead of giving you a cell reference, it'll give you the name and say this is what it was and this is what it is now.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
And you can feel free to chime in if you want to mention how you guys
Yeah,
use this.
I
I'm
mean-
kind of going quick because I know we're getting close on time.
Yeah, we have, so like when you look at some of the formulas in the treasury accounting workbooks, I mean, it's a paragraph of text and it's all named ranges. So like if you're trying to manually see if a formula changed, you have to manually see if like 20 formulas changed just to know if one number is being calculated the same way. So being able to just click go and it tells you, huge time saver.
Yeah. So the next thing I'm showing you here, I started running already, is what we call the workbook relationship diagram. Sorry, and it's what created those link diagrams I showed you before, the really gnarly ones from the customer. But I'll just describe what this thing does. So for whatever workbook you have open, which is this file over here, it goes through all the links that are in this file, and it puts an icon on the diagram here, which is kind of this first little semicircle of links and data connections. So here I have an Access database connected and also a connection out to a website. And then it keeps crawling. So it found there were links in this first workbook here, PL input 1, and it searched out for the files that it was linked to. Found a broken link, so this book 12 is just missing. You can see that by the little red X in the corner of the icon. And then it colors the icons to kind of tell you something about the data as well. So if it's just a broken link or the file is missing, you see that X in the corner. But this one here in yellow, it's basically telling me it's out of date. And the reason it's out of date is because the upstream file, so this profit and loss statement, has been updated more recently than the one in yellow. And a lot of people see this and they're like, well, doesn't Excel just automatically update that for me? And no, these are files you have to save. So if you want to have an update flow through the process, it's not a database with database tables. These are files. You need to open it up in Excel, hit refresh, and then save. So this is a really nice way to check that you have all the upstream data flowing down to your file.
Will it do this internally on one workbook for the links to all the sheets?
That's another feature. I'll show you that in a sec. Yeah. So the question was, will it do it on the sheets?
Just to confirm though, it doesn't actually have to go and get the file to do this, it's just looking for a link.
The question is, does it have to go get the file? And the answer is yes. So the reason it's yes is because so the file I have open has a link to this one called PL input 1. But in order to go further, it needs to open up PL input 1 and see what links are inside there. So it's going to crawl as far as it can. And so that's why in those diagrams I showed earlier, we went to lunch and came back. It took like 45 minutes to open up all those files and check all the links. Okay. So the question a minute ago was, can you do this at the sheet level? And the answer is yes. And I'm actually going to do this on one of Andy's files here. So this is a similar diagram, but it's showing you how the data between sheets is related to each other. So it will go out and show you externally linked files, but this is really, oh wait, did I do the wrong one?
Looks like it.
That's his worksheet.
Oh, I know why, because I was editing a formula and it was actually still active over there. Okay. So when you run any of these tools, it usually says you have changes in here. Do you want to save them before you run it? And the reason it does that is because all the analysis is happening on the last saved copy of the file. So if you make changes and run a thing and you don't save it, you're going to see how it existed before that. So while this is running, I'll explain one of the useful reasons for doing this. Let's say you have a workbook and there's a lot of sheets and you want to delete something. Maybe you're a sheet that you think you don't need anymore, but you're just not sure. You can come in here and you see the file here on the left and all the sheets over in the semicircle. So what you're really interested in seeing is, are there arrows going from one sheet to another sheet? And if you're planning to delete a sheet and you see arrows going from it to other sheets, that means there's a reference in there somewhere, and if you delete it, you're going to cause pound ref errors. So you can just run this tool, make sure you don't have any arrows going anywhere other than like this one, just it's just going to the file name. That means it's not associated with any other sheets. I could delete that, and I know I'm not going to cause any pound ref errors.
This was really helpful for us when we were doing our scoping. So when I was saying we have certain spreadsheets that we defined as being in scope or can impact our financial statements, being able to look at this really helped me to confirm what I thought should be in scope and confirm what I definitely know is out of scope. So this was helpful.
So you can find files that are dependent on it and also ones that proceed it the same way?
Finding files that precede it is a trickier one, but we have a solution for that if your files are in SharePoint. I know we're just about out of time. If you guys want to stick around for a couple more minutes, I'll show that. But I just want to point out the highlighting on here. So you can right-click on any icon and highlight the precedents or dependents, and it'll color those so you can see where the data is going or where it's coming from. So there's also a cell-level relationship diagram. So if you want to trace the precedence and dependence of an individual formula, you can do that. I'm not going to show that because I think you probably understand what that means. So real quickly, could we, actually I'll just show here. I have one quick demo of finding precedence. So this has taken me over to Office 365, and this is showing the search feature. So it's tricky to know if there's a file that's referring to my file, right? I could save a file. I have no idea if someone's linking to it. If you save those in SharePoint Online now, you can find that out. So this deck will be made available, but there's a link to a blog that explains how to do this. But basically, we have a search index property called Excel linked workbooks text. And if you do this, so this is just my SharePoint search site here. And I said Excel linked workbooks text includes, and I put part of the file name of a file that I know I want to find out who's dependent on. So peel input with a star at the end. And it found that all these files here have links to that file, right? So that's a pretty powerful thing. Is that if you're going to delete or rename a file or something like that, you can do a search and find out who's depending on that file, and you'll know who you're going to break. Okay.
Do you have the, you said there was a server level search. Is this that similar to that, or?
It's similar, but the server level is an on-prem server you need to set up with a database and all that. This is just running in Office 365. There's nothing to turn on. You just have to search and know how to search.
Do you have the link for the server level element you mentioned?
Yes, there's an online video that I can send around. What I'll do is, well, anybody who wants it, just come see me after and I'll email it out. But also, we'll make this deck available. I think they're all, should be available for the conference, and I'll make sure I put a link to that stuff in there. Can you switch to the presentation for the last couple seconds here? This deck just has some screenshots of what we've shown. Quickly, this is the server. So if you have this on-prem server tracking changes, it's basically going to give you a website that shows you the change list, just like the differences that we saw in Spreadsheet Compare. It's exactly the same comparison that's happening between versions, and it just records all that in a database with timestamps and usernames. This talks about the SharePoint search, understanding more about spreadsheets. It's not just the links. Like I said, it's the number of formulas, the number of unique formulas, data connection counts, data connections, number of sheets, things like that. So here's information about how to do that search that I just showed you. Skip over that one. This is just a list of all the different types of things that the server and Spreadsheet Compare can detect. There's also a database comparison on your desktop. If you have Spreadsheet Compare, you can actually go out and run Access Database Compare if you want to compare two database files. It won't tell you the data changes, but you'll see any structural changes in the databases. So the deck has some more resources in here, links to information about these things. And I think that's about it. Let me just see if there's any important slides left here. No, I think we're good. So thank you so much for coming, and I'm happy to answer questions if you have any.